Yes, are you recording to the
Yes.
interview stage? Okay. So yeah, I'd like to thank you for being here, and it's an honor to have you. So let's start asking some of the questions.
Great. I'm glad to be here with you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what is your pandemic and vaccine stance? How do you think we would best, solve the problem of coronavirus?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's a very tough one. I have written about that a little bit, and what I do is I distinguish between the hawks and the doves. The hawks are the ones who say it's a horrible disease and everyone should get vaccinated. We have to have herd immunity, and you have to wear a mask, and you have to stay 6 feet away from everyone else, and you have to have a passport, and it's very contagious. Those are the hawks. The doves are the ones who say, it's not really that much worse than the flu, and it's not that contagious, and the vaccines are unwarranted, unjustified, might be dangerous. People die from the vaccine, not from the COVID. And so that's the hawks and the doves. I am an agnostic. Why am I an agnostic? Because I'm a libertarian, and as a libertarian, I believe in specialization and division of labor as an economist. And as a libertarian, I don't think I have any special knowledge about this. So I'm neither a hawk nor a dove. On the other hand, I veer a little in the direction of the doves, because the hawks are, I mean, the burden of proof is on anyone who wants to compel anyone to do anything. Now, it's justified if you have a typhoid Mary who is spreading disease all over the place. You can, she has no mens rea, she wasn't doing it on purpose, but you can isolate her, you can quarantine her, you can say, look, you just can't get out into the street and give typhoid to people. But the burden of proof is on you to prove that incursions that would not otherwise be justified are justified. And I ask, have the hawks justified anything? And the answer is no. They've lied about things. They count people who die in a motorcycle accident who have COVID as a COVID death. They're hypocritical. Nancy Pelosi says everyone should wear a mask and no one should go to a beauty parlor, and she does it. They threaten doctors and epidemiologists with loss of their jobs if they disagree. They call it misinformation. They cancel people. Look, right now, the astronomers are having a debate, is Pluto a planet or not? I don't know, I'm not an astronomer. But if the Pluto people started to try to put the other people in jail and used underhanded tricks, I would then veer against them on the grounds that if they had truth on their side, they wouldn't have to hit below the belt. Well, the hawks are hitting below the belt, so I tend to side with the doves, but this is on the basis of no information, just based on how they're conducting themselves. So that would be my take on the COVID thing. Now, in the free society, what you should have is a whole bunch of private defense agencies, courts, and whatever the courts decide would be what we should have. Look, there are continuums. What's the statutory rape age? You know, if you go to bed with a 5-year-old girl, you're a statutory rapist. You go to bed with a 25-year-old woman, whatever you are, you're not a statutory rapist, because we think she's capable of deciding such things for herself, whereas a 5-year-old girl is certainly not capable of any such thing. Well, where do you draw the line? 15, 16, 17? You can't deduce that from the libertarian principles. You need courts. And hopefully they'd be private courts, not government courts. I'm an anarcho-capitalist, so I believe in private courts. And they would decide what the statutory rape age is. And then they would decide the COVID problem. So we libertarians don't have to decide everything. Sorry, I can't be more definitive. I can't give a better answer.
No, it's completely fine. So next question is, what is your perspective on status social contract theory?
That's a good one. Now, look, I believe in implicit contracts. You go to a restaurant, you order a cup of coffee, you drink it, and they present you with a bill for $1 million. No way. Even if it was in the a sign that they gave you, a menu. If they want to charge $1 million, that's okay. I'm not against profiteering, but there has to be a meeting of the minds before there's a contract, and you never agree to pay $1 million for a cup of coffee. So I believe there are implicit contracts, but an implicit contract that the government runs our lives, I find that preposterous. In the market, Vinicius has a yellow hat, a very nice yellow hat, and he bought it for $10. And there was unanimity. There was unanimous agreement. Namely, there was just two people, and Vinicius and the guy who sold him the hat, they both agreed $10 for the hat. But no government ever came into being unanimously. The United States had 9 out of the 13 colonies agreed, but even in the 9 colonies that had a majority, there was no unanimity. So how is it justified to have a government that taxes us and runs our lives and engages in paternalism? So I don't believe in a social contract that justifies government. Otherwise, the Nazis could say, look, we had a social contract. And the Jews, the blacks and the gays and the gypsies, they're all vermin, and we should kill them because that's the social contract. So if you believe in social contract, not just the U.S. social contract, what about the German or the Soviet or Mao's China, which killed 60 million people? So I'm not a big fan of social contracts. I think that this is a snare and a delusion, as they say.
Okay. So how would you respond to the claim that the state holds a legitimate claim to land the same as any other entity?
The state holds a legitimate claim to land. Well, I don't believe that the state has a legitimate title to anything because I think they're a bunch of criminals. But this reminds me of a debate I'm having with Hans Hoppe over immigration. And what Hans says is that the government has a right to not stop all immigrants, but restrict them and make sure that they behave themselves and they're not likely to be criminals or welfare moochers or anything like that. So the example I give is, suppose somebody comes from Mars or from God knows where, Africa, Asia, doesn't matter. And what he does, he takes a helicopter and he lands in the middle of Wyoming and the Rocky Mountains, or in the middle of Alaska, which is virgin territory, which has never been touched before. And he starts homesteading. Has no permit, no permission at all. And I asked Hans, well, what libertarian law did he violate? What justification is there for ICE, the government agency, to kick him out? And his answer is that the government is a guarantor of all the land in the United States, and therefore the government has a right. They own the land in our behalf, in behalf of all the citizens. And I say, well, wait a second. We libertarians have a theory about land ownership, and the theory of land ownership stems from John Locke. And Hans Hoppe has done more than most people in defending this theory and demonstrating it. The only way you get to own anything is by mixing your labor with it, but by definition, this is virgin territory. So the government hasn't, nobody has mixed their labor with this land. The first guy to mix their labor with the land was this guy from Mars, or Africa, or Asia, or wherever he's coming from. It doesn't matter. So I reject Hans's notion that somehow the government is the legitimate owner in behalf of the rest of us, namely all the citizens, because at least on libertarian grounds, you have to mix your labor with the land, and the government didn't mix its labor with anything. This guy from Mars did. Now, the immigration debate is divided by two people. One is the open immigration people, of which I am one, who say that all the immigrants are great guys and we really should have no borders and let them all in. I don't much believe that. The restrictionist ones are saying, well, you know, they're bad guys, or not all of them, but many of them are bad guys. We don't really want them. And if 1 trillion Martians came here, even though they were all good guys, we still wouldn't want 1 trillion people in the United States. I sort of am a moderate on this. That's why they call me Walter Moderate Block. I take 1 point from each side. I say that, yes, there are a lot of bad guys, and yet we should not have the government stopping people at the border. So how do I have my cake and eat it? How do I keep out bad guys and not and adhere to libertarian principle? You see, Hans wants to get rid of bad guys, but he's willing to jettison libertarian theory, and I don't buy that. So my solution is, let's privatize every square inch of the country. Every square inch of the land, every square inch of the water. And I have books, 2 books, why we should privatize all the land, the roads, and the highways, and why we should privatize the lakes and the rivers. Let's privatize everything. And now if a guy from Mars comes, we can say, oh, tut, 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 you're a trespasser. You have to get out. You have to get the permission of the owner. So in that way, we can have our cake and eat it. We can keep bad guys out without jettisoning libertarian theory. And I want to keep bad guys out. And also, I want to keep libertarian theory. I don't want to give one to attain the other. And I think we can have our cake and eat it that way. So I'm sorry to go on this long rant, but you asked me about the government owning property, and I figured that this way would be a good way to answer that question.
Yeah, definitely. So next question. Do you see the state's overwhelming grip on education of weakening the point of libertarian thought? Do you see the state's overwhelming grip on education ever weakening to the point of libertarian thought being able to become mainstream?
I'm sorry, your voice faded in and out. Maybe
sorry.
Say it again, or maybe Vinicius, you say it. Something about education.
Do you see that the state's overwhelming grip on education ever weakening to the point of libertarian thought being able to become mainstream?
To the point where what becomes mainstream?
Vinius, can you say it?
To the point.
Libertarian thought, libertarian theory. You know.
I see. Do I see the state hold over education weakening so much that libertarians will be able to have a foothold? Not really. I mean, I'd like it. It would be wonderful if we privatized all of education. Now, look, we do have a foothold. I'm a professor at Loyola University, and I'm a libertarian. And there must be, I don't know how many libertarian professors in the United States. Maybe 500? I'm not sure. I don't know the exact number. I think there is something like 40,000 professors, though. So if we have 500, that's, I guess, 1% or something like that. Well, 1% is a foothold. So even now, we still have a foothold, whether it's private education or public education. There are only 2 or 3 schools that are really private, Hillsdale, Grove City, and Anna Maria, and maybe 1 or 2 more. Even my school, Loyola, is heavily involved with government, and most private schools, Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, Chicago, Columbia, are also quasi-private. They're not really private. And then there are public universities. But we do have a foothold. There are libertarian professors. There are Austrian professors. My estimate is 500. I don't know where I got that from. I just sort of made it up, but that's sort of my gut answer to that. So we have a foothold. Do I see it increasing? Well, you know, we live in a woke, socially justice, what do you call it, cancel culture, and they're trying to get rid of libertarians. So on the other hand, maybe the Republicans will get in because the wokesters are trying to get rid of conservatives as well. And maybe we can tag along with the conservatives, like in the Federalist Society. So that's a very good question, but and unfortunately, I don't really know the answer. I mean, I know what I would like. Yes, I would like not just libertarianism and just Austrianism. I want university to be open to all shades of opinion, including Marxists, including critical race theory, you know, including everything. So I wouldn't see a university that was just limited to libertarianism as a good thing. Maybe a few like that, a few lefty, a few middle, whatever. But the ideal university would have many shades of opinion so that the students could make up their own minds and would see professors clashing with each other politely, but clashing. One of the problems with the critical race theory is they don't want to discuss anything. They just want to say if you disagree with them, you're a racist or a white supremacist or something like that. But I still think they should be included in the mix. I'm a big fan of John Stuart Mill and his On Liberty, who said if you really want to know your own position, you have to know the other guy's position too, because your position is based in contrast to theirs. And if you had only libertarianism, you would miss other views. So I'm for an open university.
Okay. So what is a more eloquent takedown of central planning, the Hayekian knowledge problem or the ECP?
Well, I'm a Hayekian and I'm a Misesian. I think both have made great important contributions. That Hayek's knowledge idea that specific knowledge, for example, I know that Vinicius is a better plumber than Ugnaught. Is that your name, Ugnaught?
Yeah, Ugnaught.
Okay, and yet I know that Ugnaught is a better electrician than Vinicius. And how am I going to get that information to the central planning board? Hayek says, you know, it's silly. And Mises says, look, unless we have prices, you're like in an ocean vessel without a compass. You don't know where you're going. And the only way you're going to get prices, that is prices that reflect scarcity, is through bidding and markets. And if the government owns all the means of production, well, you're not going to have any of that. So you're literally flying blind or at sea without a rudder or without a compass. So I'm a fan of both.
What is your opinion on Hans Hermann Hoppe in contrast to Rothbard?
Well, Hans, I don't know if there's any difference between Hans and Murray. I don't think Hans has ever criticized Murray on anything. I'm not sure. Well, no, I take that back. Not so much that Hans has criticized Murray, but Hans, I think, did a better job of one thing than Murray. And Murray, I think, agreed with Hans. And that is not so much what are the implications of libertarianism, but what is the justification of the non-aggression principle and private property rights based on homesteading. And Murray said it was natural law, and I think he did an excellent job on that. And then Hans came along and said his argument from argument. And here I'm a big, big fan of Hans, as I am on 99% of everything he ever wrote. I'm a big fan of Murray and Hans. And what Hans said is, look, the only way to get to the truth about anything is to allow argument. If you don't allow argument, how are you going to ever know you're getting at the truth if you won't allow people to disagree with you? So then Hans said, well, what do you need to have an argument? And he said, well, you need private property rights in physical domain, and you need ownership of yourself. And nobody should punch anyone because, you know, if I'm having a debate with you and I punch you and I win, let's say I'm stronger than you, I didn't really win the argument. I just punched you. So he's deriving the non-aggression principle and private property rights from what is necessary to have an argument. And he's deriving the necessity of having an argument to achieve truth in anything, not just in libertarianism, but in anything. Chemistry. I mean, if you want to have good understanding of chemistry, you have to allow chemists to disagree with each other. If you don't allow them to disagree with each other, you're not going to have much progress in chemistry or physics, biology, or economics, or justice. So I'm a big fan of Hans on that. Now, Hans has had criticism of this. One or two of my articles defends Hans against his critics. So I would say that's one area where Hans and Murray are a little bit different. I don't know of any other area where they diverge. So that would be my response.
Okay, so how would you suggest studying an ANCAP society? And what would be your preferred method to convert the masses to ANCAP? Or at least like convince more people? Because
Well,
most people...
I think the way we're now trying it is the best way. Through discussion, through argument. What we're now doing here, you're interviewing me about things and you're going to publicize this, and hopefully that will convince more people. What I do as a publisher, I write articles, I write op-eds, I write books. I teach students at Loyola. There's the Mises Institute, there's the Cato Institute, there's a Reason Foundation, the Independent Institute. These are think tanks. There are 50 states. Each of them has a think tank. In Louisiana, it's the Pelican Institute, which is trying to promote liberty on a statewide basis. There's the Free State Project in New Hampshire. Libertarians are encouraged to all move to New Hampshire, and if we focus there and concentrate there, maybe we can have a senator or and get more publicity for freedom. So these are the ways I think, you know, Ayn Rand wrote a magnificent book, Atlas Shrugged. There are comedians. Dave Smith is a comedian. There are people that make movies. One of my favorite TV shows is South Park, which is written by libertarians. I'm a big fan of Cartman. I love Cartman and, you know, and the boys. So I think this is the best way to convert people to liberty through free expression, discussion. The problem is, you know, we keep getting canceled by Ron Paul. You know, when you ask, well, what's the best way to promote liberty? What I do is I ask, well, who are the two most successful people in promoting liberty? And my answer is Ron Paul and Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand for my generation, Ron Paul for your generation. And I ask, well, what do they have in common? And the answer is pretty much nothing. I mean, Ayn Rand was not a nice person. If you disagreed with her, she wouldn't smack you, but she would smack you intellectually. Whereas Ron Paul is sweetie pie of all sweetie pies. He's just such a nice guy. So what I get from this is there's no one right way to promote liberty. If Ayn Rand can do it one way and Ron Paul another way, I guess maybe the third most successful would have been Milton Friedman, who again is very different than those other two. So, you know, I would say to you young guys, promote liberty in the way that's the most enjoyable for you. And that way you don't burn out. You'll keep doing it for the rest of your life, as I am doing. I'm 80 years old and I've been doing it, I don't know, for 55 years, maybe almost 60 years. When I was 20, I got converted to liberty. Yeah, I guess around 60 years I've been trying to do this. And I'm not burned out. I'm still very enthusiastic about promoting liberty because I do what I like. So I would say everybody should promote liberty in the most enjoyable way for them.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Yeah. So do you believe ANCAP are at the least fully private city, including private defense, hospitals, firefighters, etc., will happen in a lifetime?
I'm sorry, your voice goes in and out, and I find it very hard to understand. Maybe Vinicius, you could.
I'm sorry.
Try it again.
Do you believe that ANCAP and private, you know, the increased privatization of, you know, government services will happen in a lifetime?
Ah, now I got I got the exact, I mean, I hate to answer a question if I can't understand it. I'm sure you'll appreciate that. Do I think that we'll have privatization of government services? Well, you know, one of my books is why we should convert all the government roads into private highways, because something like 40,000 people a year die on the government highways due to lack of competition. And if we had some competition, we would reduce the deaths by a gigantic amount. Are we more likely to, I wrote this book, I think it was in 2009. Are we more likely to have private roads now than then? No. The whole idea is like I don't know, a lead balloon. I don't think it's going anywhere, even though I think it would be justified to privatize the highways. Every time they do research comparing public and private, the private is usually 1/3 or 1/4 the expense. For example, delivering mail, FedEx versus the post office. much cheaper, much better. Taking a ton of garbage away, private is much better than public. So whenever the two are operating in tandem, private is much better because, you know, if you don't do a good job in the private sector, you go broke. And if you do a good job, you can expand your base of operation. Whereas in the government, if you do a bad job, like the Army Corps of Engineers, during Katrina, the levees fell and 1,900 people died. Well, the Army Corps of Engineers is still in charge. So you don't get much progress. So I think the intellectual case is very clear that we should privatize, but I don't see much movement in that direction. Rather, I see Bernie Sanders, my old high school buddy, going around at college campuses, and thousands of people come and applaud socialism, which is the very opposite of privatizing public services. It's more, you know, getting 3.5 trillion or 5 trillion more government and less private. I mean, every time the government spends money, it's money the private sector could have spent and can't. So I'm not really a big optimist. As I said, I've been at this for 60 years, since I was 20, roughly, and I don't see any great movement. Well, you know, I do see a movement toward liberty. It's complicated because when I first met Murray in around 1964, I asked him how many libertarians were there in the whole world, and you know what he said? 25. And he'd be in a position to know because he was sort of the center of the libertarian movement. How many libertarians are there now? I would say 25 million if you define it broadly enough and you take in the whole world. So we've gone from 25 to 25 million in roughly 50 years. And that's a gigantic proportional increase. But when Murray said that, there were 3.5 billion people on the planet. Now there are 7 billion on the planet. So we've gone from 25 to 25 million, a gigantic proportional increase, but they've gone from 3.5 billion to 7, only a doubling, but they added 3.5 billion non-libertarians. So if you look at it proportionally, we're doing great. If you look at it absolutely, we're pathetic. And I'm not sure which way is the right way to look at that.
Okay, so I'm gonna go see if there's some more comments from our viewers. So.
Okay. Well, I've allotted a half hour and we've only got 5 or 6 more minutes, so maybe 1 or 2 more questions.
Well, Professor, we don't want to take much more of your time. We know you have a busy schedule. So we want to thank you for being with here. It's a big honor for us. And I hope we can do this again, like sometime again. And yes, thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure. Send me the URL for this afterward. And right. These were great questions. You come up with another 10 questions and I'll be happy to do this again. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.